Well, they are definitely thinking about it, but
Who
I
are?
will say
Tory MPs or
no,
the inside track?
centre. The centre has thought about a May election,
Oh my
but
God.
I think it would be.
I learned so much from this podcast.
Ed, I think it would be absolutely nuts. Tell you what I did think, and I think I've been pretty positive about Rachel and Keir Starmer's economic package in the way they've presented themselves as an opposition in recent months. I thought it was a bit lame yesterday on Budget Day. I thought Keir Starmer's speech was a bit boilerplate. It didn't, it's a hard speech to give, but he didn't even attempt to address what was actually in the budget or come up with some sort of, trickery which you and I used to pull off, which is, on page 102, it says the tax burden's going up. Or you could pull that off in the speech and make it look like you've on top of all the detail. He didn't try that at all. The most animated anyone got on the Labour side was when Angela Rayner hated Jeremy Hunt bringing up her tax affairs, which I mentioned last week as a kind of thing that the Tories are going after. This
Jeremy Hunt, who then when asked by Robert Peston how many houses he earned, said he wouldn't talk about that because it was personal. And you think, well, I don't think that kind of held you back the day before. I mean, it was shocking.
Anyway, it was quite. For those who watched it, the Tory benches and Angela Rayner having a go at each other was quite amusing. And
she looked like she was loving it. I think.
I suspect that story's still got a bit way to run. And then yes, Rachel. They've known that it's been leaked that the Tories are going to get rid of non-doms and extend the windfall tax on energy companies. So you would think that they had a kind of slightly stronger response to. Haven't they shot your fox? How are you going to fund all these things? Her answer was, well, we'll come back to that. I don't know. I just thought, I'm going to pay you a compliment. I would have thought like Shadow Chancellor Gordon Brown, as advised by Ed Balls at the time, would have given a more powerful, more essentially moral response to the Tory budgets at the time. You would have had a clearer idea of what Labour's economic alternative would have been. Even if there wasn't that much detail. And if the Tories were moving in to shoot one of your foxes and had told you they were going to do that, you would have been ready with a quicker response of what you were going to do as a result.
I think the problem they've got is that they'll be worrying if they fill this gap now, is that another fox to be shot between now and the election? And she's caught between, if she moves immediately, she leaves herself open to Jeremy Hunt pinching it. And if she leaves it too late, as happened with the shadow budget in 1992, when you were in the election campaign, essentially raising taxation to fill a gap, then it looks kind of bad and desperate and behind the curve. But it's also, it's not easy to find 2 billion. I always used to think when I was at the Treasury, that that anything up to $250 million was quite easy to find. I mean, you could lose 100 billion in the rounding, 250 you could find, 500 was a challenge, 2 billion a year is quite a large amount of money to find. You can't do that but by easy avoidance schemes here or there. But she's, I think, made the right decision to not resile from the commitments, because that would absolutely be undermining of moral authority. So she's going to have to find an alternative source of revenue. And I do think she has some time, partly because of the way Jeremy Hunt did the budget yesterday, to sort that out. If it was me, I would think the corporate tax changes last autumn to support investment were very generous. And I would think to myself, if I need to find 2 billion, then a move on the corporation tax rate would be my way to solve it. But she's ruled that out. I mean, Rachel Reeves has said she's not going to raise the corporation tax rate. So as we've discussed before, wealth taxes, corporation tax, personal taxes, she kind of boxed herself in. But she's got some time to solve that. I think actually the windfall tax is slightly more complicated, because when they did the retreat on 28 billion, they didn't do a full U-turn, as I think we expected them to do, and say this was an aspiration. They went back to a smaller package of spend, which raises the question, with the smaller package of spend, is it really realistic to stick with the 2030 goal? But now the extension of the windfall tax eats away at some of that room for manoeuvre again. And I wonder whether on that one, they don't need to move to aspirational language. Our aim would be, our goal should be, or to start a conversation with the private sector about are there ways in which they can lever in more private money. I think they're going to find this one harder
Yeah.
to solve politically, whereas I think the former one is just about finding a chunk of money.
Yeah, I think we've talked the 2030 decarbonised electricity target from Labour is still a target the Tories are going to keep hitting. By the way, just in passing, there was something I've never seen on Budget Day yesterday, which was there was a government minister called Andrew Bowie, who's an energy minister, who took to Twitter X to criticise the budget and its windfall tax. And he's a minister in the government.
He's a minister?
Yes. Anyway.
Is he still a minister?
Yes, amazing.
What's happened to discipline?
Well, he said he's going to raise it privately. He's going to raise his concerns, having made them public.
So he announced publicly on Twitter he's going to raise his concerns privately. That is so sort of, postmodern.
I thought that was something I hadn't seen. Anyway, we should just, very last word on this. Come on. There's quite a lot of speculation there might be a May general election. Is that a budget that sets up a May general election? We've always been sceptical that a Prime Minister will want to call an election when he's 26 points behind in the opinion polls. But what do we think?
I don't think really anybody cares what I think about this.
I do.
And it may be...
And our listeners do.
And it may be, you could say that about many of the things which we talk about. But so as I said that, I realised this was maybe a slightly stupid thing to say because, it was of a more meta nature, that question. Does anybody care about anything we say? However, I think Labour has always assumed that Rishi Sunak will not be able to cope with terrible local election results, personally, politically, and therefore you need to go earlier to have an election on local elections day to avoid the local elections being a total bloodbath. We've always said, though, that if you are thinking about the economy, you've always got to wait and hope that things are going to turn up. What I've heard people say to me, though, people have said that George Osborne used to be emphatic that the election would be later. And that recently, listening to our podcast, they've noticed that he's been a bit more shy about saying November, and that therefore, does this reveal, what you're hearing? So I think, as I said, they may not care about what I say, but they do care about what you say. Are you as emphatic on November as you were before?
Well, I'm not quite as emphatic because there are a surprising number of Tory MPs.
News being made?
No. Well, I'll come on to... So there are a surprising number of Tory MPs who think they are considering a May election. There's quite a lot of Tory MPs who would like a May election because they think things are only going to get worse politically for the Tories over the coming months.
We're not talking about Tory MPs. We're talking about your inside track.
Well, they are definitely thinking about it, but... I will say...
Tory MPs or the inside track?
Centre. The centre has thought about a May election.
Oh,
but
my God.
I think it would be...
I learned so much from this podcast.
Ed, I think it would be absolutely nuts. I mean, they're 26 points behind in the opinion polls. You do not call a general election when you're 26 points behind in the opinion polls and you still have 9 months left of your mandate to run. I mean, if I was Sunak, I wouldn't have ruled out an election in January 2025. You want to give yourself maximum room for manoeuvre. And just to conclude this, the budget showed that, the economic message is getting more positive, more optimistic. The government is able to do some things that it thinks will help it win the election. And so why wouldn't you let another 6 months of better economic news come, take the country out of recession, see inflation fall down to 2%, and that gives you at least a better chance, albeit still an uphill struggle, of winning that general election.
I think that was very, may I say, that was very, very revealing. And your emphaticness was crystal clear. But the fact that you don't hear that matched by others at the centre is also very interesting.